Hey there, it's Carrie from Wrap Your Head Around Silks. You're listening to the Expecting Aerialist podcast, and I got my little girl here with me. She wants to say hi. So today we have my dear friend Faegann Harlow. We were tour partners for Motley Crue, and she has really delved into learning about how pain and trauma stay in the tissues of the body. She's studied a lot. She's a body worker, and she's going to share her knowledge with us today. Here we go. Faegann is like my soul sister, and we met because back in 2012, I was put on the Motley Crue tour to replace one of the aerialists, and Faegann was the aerialist that was already the aerial captain, and she had been on the tour for quite a while. How long, Faegann?
I joined them at the first residency in Las Vegas, the beginning of 2012. So we did, I believe, a 3-week residency in the Hard Rock, joined for their summer tour. And that was about a 3-month run with, forgive me, I could be off on this, but I'm pretty sure it was with Kiss on that time.
No, it was with Kiss, because Kiss was still on it when I joined.
Perfect. Excellent.
The band Kiss. They are so special, those guys.
Oh, yes. Iconic for sure. Those personalities, something else.
Yep. Yeah. They're like caricatures of people. It's awesome. Like, I end up getting this job, and they put me on right before we go to Australia. So me and Faegann did a little rehearsal in LA because Faegann's based in San Diego. So she drove up. We met for the first time, got along so well, and then started rehearsal. And then I've told the story on this podcast before about my, baptism by fire, the Australian Motley Crue tour. I've already told that story. So when I met Faegann, she was just, even our production manager, the one that hired me, said, Faegann looks one way, and then her personality is kind of not what you would expect, because she's got tattoos and she's like super buff, and she's, you had your hair like shaved on the side at the time. You just had this super edgy look. And then you're just like this super sweet, holistic yogi chick. And just such a wonderful person. So not that tatted, edgy people aren't wonderful people, but he was right.
People would know me about suspension before they even met me. So you throw things like chains, modifications, tattoos, suspension, and then that would already give people this idea of who I was. And I was so grateful, honestly, when I got to meet Carrie, because you were just such an open, easy aerial partner, just right off the bat to get along with. Choreography, working with you is super smooth and easy. And it was one of those things, like you said, just soul sisters, like immediately we're like, this is going to click. This is going to work. And those shows with you were unforgettable for sure.
Yeah, we had a good time. We also got in trouble a lot together if we were like like one count off of each other, because we're doing duo silks. Our production manager he likes to yell. He's a yeller, and he would just yell and get in trouble. It was like we were in school getting in trouble. Mind you, I think we did a pretty good job generally. But so when I first met Faegann, when she says modifications, she's got some physical modifications, and she's got the tats, and her thing at the time was chains. And for the show, she had forgive me if I'm wrong, over 7-minute chains act. Like, who would do that to themselves? But 7 minutes, and the rig was 2 points. They were loops, but they were 7 to 10 feet apart. So she would basically start on the ground in a skin the cat. She was in the middle, and as the points go up, her arms get pulled out to the sides. Right, that's a thought I was having. Whatever you guys are thinking, that's what I was thinking. So basically, she's coming out of a full skin the cat while her arms are getting pulled apart from her body as she gets dragged up, 25 feet to a 30-foot rig. Eventually, it lets go of the point that's not in the center, and then does the chain act on one loop. Is that correct? Am I remembering this correctly?
Yeah, you got it down pretty pat. We were, when we arrived at that tour round in Australia, I remember touching base. And that was when the production manager was just like, oh, so we got this cool idea and we actually want to just go ahead and separate your chains. And I just had that like deer in headlights kind of a look. And I was just like, wait, what? I'd never rehearsed it this way. I'd always done like the 2-loop style, similar to what you'd see with like a span set or sometimes strap loops. And so it was rigged on one point. And they were separated 10 feet apart. And Carrie totally recalls this, right? I forgot actually that I started in a Skin the Cat.
I will never forget that. I'm like, bitch is crazy.
I don't know where I got that idea or how that happened, but yeah. So as the wench would, go ahead and lift the apparatus, I would let go of one chain and swing over to one side, do a couple of moves, and then I would time it. I would wait till the other chain came back on the backswing. So then I would grab the other chain. I would swing onto the one that was 10 feet away.
Okay, I don't have that memory at all.
The reason I remember this, Carrie, and you know what? Honestly, Tommy Lee will probably remember this because there was one night on my swing trajectory, I almost got impaled by one of those flagpoles. And I didn't see it. No. I honestly was clueless, but I caught Tommy Lee's eyes. And then it was after the show. He was just like, I cannot believe you just survived that. I was just like, what even happened? Like, I knew something did because we caught that eye like lock in the middle of the act. And I was like, you've just freaked out on me. Like, what happened? But yeah. So there was some swinging action back and forth. I called it my George of the Jungle moment. But yeah, it was a fun act for sure, but crazy times.
Well, and you did like real drops. And I just remember thinking, okay, she's backstage, she's getting ready for this act. This is what she's wearing, you guys. She's wearing the leather boots that you do for like trapeze. But besides that, she's just wearing fishnets and a pair of cute little bottoms and like a bra top and a vest over it and some gloves.
Yeah.
Like no protection around the thighs, no protection around the hips, like around the vag, nothing. And she's doing like setting up for double dive rolls. She's setting up for hip key drops in the loop, like stuff that I wouldn't want to do with just fishnets on, even if I was in a hammock, even if I was on a span set. This is my first like introduction to Faegann. Like we're getting to know each other. I'm watching her through the first couple shows because as my listeners know, I didn't have any rehearsal. We just had shows and we just dived straight in. And I was watching her do this act every night and just blown away, like mentally blown away by this. And this is a lot what we're going to talk about today because Faegann is also, she is now a full-time body worker. She has invested a lot of time and energy into researching this stuff because it's her job and then also because she's just really into it. She's just so fascinated by the stuff about pain science and trauma in the tissues. And, we're going to dive into pain science and trauma to the body and how an aerial practice can really affect our tissues and, the bodies that we work so hard to take care of. Let's get into how you got to the point where you were when I met you. No bruising anymore from it. You didn't feel the need for protection. How did you get there? What was it like? What is your process now with it? What is your thought process now about how you got there and everything?
Yeah. It's a really great question, especially for a lot of people that might be curious about getting into an apparatus such as chains. I think the first thing is when I approach the apparatus, there's a lot of fumbling, first and foremost with the rigging setup, right? We may have opportunity around like silks or lyres or traps, a little bit more common apparatus to jump on them and feel out like our sizing or what our preferences are. But when you come across something like chains, it's really rare that we have an opportunity to experience them before we make that investment. The challenging part ultimately was finding shackles that steel shackles that would fit, like the pin would fit through the chain. So that actually was kind of a determining factor for the diameter of my chain when I first started, was how I could rig it. And what I learned over time was, depending on the diameter of the chain I was working on, it affected my grip strength. So if I had a larger, chain link, so to speak, a larger gauge, then I was much more inclined to need gloves. I started off with like full-fledged motorcycle gloves, and I burned through those so quick. The seams would just rip, especially through the fingers. And I eventually went down to this was over time and learning experience, I went down to fingerless motorcycle gloves. So I always stuck with leather, but the fingerless ones just seemed to hold up a lot longer. And then I got to a place too where if I had smaller chain links, I think I ended up having 3 different diameters over my full-fledged chain career. And the smallest diameter was always the easiest for me to grip onto. So I did a lot of performances with no gloves. It was just a much smaller chain that I could get like a really nice solid grip around. I did use gaiters. Carrie mentioned that before. Bless them. I don't think I could have done it without them. But, just kind of the understanding of what's happening in your tissues when you're getting kind of this repetitive exposure to essentially what we know is like bruising, right? We might visibly have bruising. We might have that like bruise to the touch type of a feeling. And this usually happens when you come to an apparatus, initially. You can even have silk bruising, if you're doing drops and you're landing at the back of your knees, things like that. Small blood vessels that are being broken or damaged, right? And so this is why you might have some visible blood that would come to the surface for this bruising. Ideally, these will heal within 10 to 14 days. There's 4 phases of healing that we can kind of monitor just to see really to what extent of damage we might be doing to our tissues. When we look at something like chains, or now there's a lot of dynamic drops on Lyra, which is another really hard surface apparatus. When we're continuously getting these small contusions, these small bruisings, we just want to monitor, make sure that it's going through the 4 phases of healing so that we don't end up with something more severe. And I'll give you an example because I did get one on Motley. The first phase of healing, when we're getting this soft tissue contusion, this bruising, is what they call hemostasis phase. And this is essentially the physiological response to stop bleeding. We essentially the body wants to keep blood in the damaged blood vessel so that it doesn't kind of overtake the area. Right. The next phase we move into is inflammation. And inflammation is a healthy process. There's definitely a point where it can work against us, but overall, inflammation is good. These damaged blood vessels create substances, bradykinin, substance P, histamine. And these are all agents that, if left lingering, can start to create discomfort. So the inflammation phase, what it does is it brings in a whole bunch of white blood cells with nutrients and enzymes to go ahead and remove these chemical sources of the bradykinin, substance P, histamine, right? I say all of these because these are all the same constituents of a trigger point, right? So this is kind of an interesting segue when we look at it from a bodywork perspective. I'm sure that there's a lot of listeners out there who've probably had, some body work that have had some points in their shoulders that are just, where you want to just jump off the table. You're like, how can that possibly be so intense? And those are the same substances that are actually locked in your tissues. And
so you're talking from a layman's perspective. You're talking about that like day right after it looks bruised and it's also inflamed. And this is what you're talking about.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you for getting some clarification there. Yes. So, if you're training your apparatus, you get that initial kind of a bruise post, a day of training. These would be the healing phases that you would go through, that hemostasis or stasis phase into the inflammation phase. And so we want that inflammation to actually come in to go ahead and remove these these inflammatory chemicals that are associated with these damaged blood vessels. The next phase we move into is called the proliferation phase. This is when collagen and extracellular matrix start to come into the area to rebuild the soft tissue, right? So especially in cases if you're on chains or lyra, trapeze, any apparatus truly, if you're getting repetitive exposure to probably some pretty hard drops, and there's starting to be some surface level tissue damage for the most part. But what will happen is the body's going to go ahead and start to bring in new substances to go ahead and heal that tissue. And that's collagen and extracellular matrix. If you've ever had, like, let's say a silk burn, right? And you start to get that like scab that'll come over to start to heal that tissue, right? Part of that, like if you got a really deep burn, you're going to notice that the tissue that's repairing underneath it might be kind of a whole bunch of different layers. Maybe it's kind of thick. And so the final phase is known as maturation. And what it does is actually dehydrates this previous tissue that's come in, this collagen, this extracellular matrix. It starts to dehydrate it so that the tissues are no longer a whole bunch of just mixed-matched cells. And it starts to what they call cross-link or cross-hatch, so that you get this, like I always see like a hashtag in my head when I say this. So all of a sudden that the skin starts to heal, or the tissues beneath it, the connective tissue starts to heal beneath it in a strong linked pattern, so that further tissue damage is going to be reduced, right? We'll go through this healing phase, the 4 I just described, within about 10 to 14 days. If it's really deep, let's say sometimes, I'm sure there's some listeners out there as well that have that like really deep muscle bruise, where often you don't actually have a discoloration. Sometimes it's just that really deep penetrating sensation. Those can take anywhere up to 3 to 6 months to actually heal, to go through these 4 different phases.
Really? Because the fibers are actually like really broken? Like
it's just a matter of kind of essentially like depth of the tissue, right?
Okay.
Your accessing point is kind of from a surface level down through several layers of tissues.
I see. Okay.
Right. And so it's I'm not going to say that it couldn't happen, but it's rare that you're just damaging the tissue that's super, super deep. If you're getting like a muscle contusion, you're essentially done cellular damage, which again is healthy and normal. Like we experience it all the time with injury, but it's repairing all those layers of tissues. So there's just a much bigger healing process that's going on.
Okay, I see. So when you first started chains, like what were your bruises like? Were they like, okay. Were they like how bad was it?
It was definitely like full leg, full hip type of stuff. I'm sure there's somebody out there that's had this too. I would always get super impressed because sometimes I literally would get chain links that would show up. Like I would get the actual patterning of a chain and I would get like 3 or 4 of them in a row. To me, wow. I always thought that was super cool, but
I think I would have different words for it than super cool. So when you first started and then in your practice, you kept on, like, how long did it take for your body to not have that fight or flight and just, this is normal?
Yeah. It's a
how
really
long
good
did
point.
that take?
I think it was probably about 5 months of training chains, pretty much day in and day out, like maybe about 3 hours a day, before I finally landed a show. I had the time. I had the,
You had the will. You had the discipline. Oh my God. So 5 or 6 months. I mean, also Faegann is not one to go into something lightly. Like when she does it, she's serious about it. So
there's some truth to that. I won't lie.
So 5 to 6, and your goal was to be able to perform. So you ended up. Was this what you were preparing for, the tour that I met you on?
No, I actually started performing. I was in my first stage show in Las Vegas on chains in 2009. So
Okay.
I'd been doing them for probably about 3 years before got picked up with Motley.
And so your chains practice now, I feel like you have taken a break for a while. Is that correct?
I have. And I've actually taken a pretty big break from all of the aerials at the moment. I've really dove down this pain science, neuroscience train, honestly, because there's an interesting segue that when we start studying pain that happens is acute pain and chronic pain actually respond very differently in the body. And so to me, they weren't like mutually exclusive. I wouldn't say that the constant exposure to tissue damage from chains led me down into a chronic pain cycle, but it was a factor in it. I had a lot of other autoimmune situations that were brewing under the surface while I was with Motley. And so that's what really just opened up a new doorway. I actually had been a body worker previous to Motley and throughout all of it, but it's what really put me down the path of really just learning a lot more about how the body interprets pain, what that process looks like.
Yeah, I remember we would have lots of conversations on the road, and you were just dealing with some chronic pain issues that were not going away. And then after we left tour, same thing, it just kept on going. And it's just so hard to have pain that you can't put your finger on and that no one seems to be able to figure out. And I understand why you went down that rabbit hole, because you were trying to heal yourself. So Faegann and I got on a phone call before this to talk about, because she's just got so much knowledge in that brain of hers. So we wanted to focus this. So we wanted to talk about pain science and trauma in the tissue. And she told me there are 5 different sources. And if you could start with those, and then we'll kind of go down the list.
So one of the first ways our body accumulates trauma in the tissues is injury or impact, right? We just had this conversation about how, consistent force on the body with a apparatus of any sort, really, we're getting these repetitive exposures to shock absorption, or the need for shock absorption. So we have injury and impact trauma, and an injury could be, really anything. Many of us have already experienced in our lifetimes of just twisting our ankle the wrong way, turning your head around too quickly to, look behind your car when you're backing up. But for aerialists, a lot of the times it's going to come down to, a shoulder injury of some sort, maybe a hip flexor injury, things of these natures. But impact also being in our category of aerialists as, these drop forces that we're exposing ourselves to.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about all the different apparatuses, and we, not scientifically, but we're like, okay, it seems like bungee, silk's hammock is a little softer on the body. Rope straps come next, trapeze, lyra, and then chains. There are other apparatuses, but we didn't go too far deep into it. But if you think about if you're on maybe a lyra or chains or even a trapeze, you do a big drop, and it doesn't have a lot of give, where the silks does.
Mm-hmm.
And our body is the only thing there that's going to absorb any of the shock. We have to absorb it because the apparatus is not. Is that how you explained it to me? Is that correct?
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. If we have a certain level of shock absorption in our apparatus, it helps us or helps our physical body. But if we're working with an apparatus that's a little more less malleable, something like chains or a lyra, depending on how it's rigged above, your body is going to be taking those shock forces, and we know just from sheer exposure of how many successful aerialists are out there and healthy bodies that it's not something to be overly concerned with, but it is a factor in recognizing how we train. And so there's some different ways that we can really kind of support our body in training for this exposure of impact trauma, right? Essentially, I like to think of having equal activation and equal length ability, right? if I were to take an example of your bicep being in half flexion, right? So a 90-degree angle in your arm. And the bicep is neither in full contraction, it's also not in its full resting length, right? But if becomes the bicep's home, if this becomes where the bicep knows it's like, this is my where I live, and we can relate this to like a compensation pattern, right? Like if somewhere in the body we have a holding pattern and this is interpreted as that's home, and then we apply force to the forearm, we're going to put extra strain on that bicep, and it's going to land in the tendon and it's going to land in the joint. So how can we protect our body when we're experiencing these high forces is to essentially be able to train our body so that it has full activation and full length capacity, right? We want to give essentially the stimulation to whatever muscle groups we're working with, that they know how long they can actually access, right? We also want them to be super responsive so that if they hit that full length of access, let's just say we're doing something where you're landing in kind of a backward stance position, right? And it's going to be your spine and a bit through that hip flexor that is going to take that impact, that force. So how can we allow those muscles to be able to be soft enough that they can reach their nice extension, right? Through the hip flexor and through the spine, that it can absorb that shock, but then also come back to protect the joints, right? So all of our joints are ideally have, mobilization, whether it's a glide or a slide. So we want to make sure that those guys have the accessibility to move. And it's through that equal active and lengthening that we can ensure that we can start to support that joint a little bit better. So I always think about, mobility and stability in terms of our joint health and activation and length when I'm thinking about more of the muscular or myofascial aspects.
Okay, let me stop you because my brain is working very hard right now. Faegann always does this to me. She goes, she puts me in a mind spin, and I'm like, hold on. So I do understand what you're saying. So, but when it comes to like layman's terms, training our bodies to have this accessibility of length and activation and myofascial glide, what does that boil down to?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, for activation, what I really like to work with is eccentric loading is kind of an easy way that we could look at that. Is we'll take our same bicep example, right? Is to go ahead and train that bicep to be able to access its full length. Is I would go ahead and from that same 90 degree, or I could go from full contraction, is go ahead and work the eccentric contraction. I'm going to go ahead and lengthen that bicep while it's holding load, while it's holding weight, right? And that's one way I can train that muscle, that you can access this length. You can go this full distance. And so it's a great way of training when it comes to shock absorption. Eccentric training is great for a lot of reasons, but it's fantastic when we're looking at shock absorption.
So would a good example of this be, okay, you do a regular Russian climb up the fabric, and you go, when you're at the top, you put your hands on the fabric into your chest, and you lower yourself down, straight arms, and then wrap the feet, and then repeat. Is that reverse climb what you're talking about?
Fantastic. It's a great example. Yeah. Woo woo.
Sometimes my brain works too, Faegann.
I love that she's coming with the applications, real life.
Yeah, so our reverse climb would be a great eccentric exercise where you're going from a short arm to a long arm with control and slowly, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so training that, and then also, if I can use my wonderful example, that when we're doing this, the shoulder blades are also gliding on the rib cage, and that's your glide.
Yes, yes. And then that's healthy mechanics of a joint. So the joint is being supported in its ability to move the way it's designed to move.
And so this process of training the entire length of the joint and the joint range of motion and the glide of the bones working like they should be, that will give us more protection in our body when we take on a big drop. Is that the thesis?
That's essentially the direction. Yes. Yes, I agree.
I love it. Okay. So you guys just imagine me and Faegann in a tour bus with plastic glasses of cheap red wine bought from the local CVS because we can't really leave the area. And some like leftover food from catering. Mm-hmm. These are the conversations that we would have, I feel like, in the middle of the night. I think this happened many times.
Definitely happened many times. And this is why I knew immediately upon meeting you, I was like, oh yeah, this is going to work.
Oh my God, we got so nerdy
right
on Ariel.
Yeah.
We were like, so if we did this and blah, 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 and hip key over and straighten the arm and then bring the leg through. And the other people on tour were like, you guys are fucking annoying.
This is very true too.
Yeah. Oh my God, so funny. So, okay, you kind of dove in, but I wanted to actually enumerate what you had said to me in the prep for this wonderful conversation. Yeah. Trauma in our tissue. Number one, repetitive motion. Number two, onset of injury or force, which is what you delved into.
That's what I went
Physiological, social conditioning, and choice over time, holding patterns. So those are the 5 ways, and us aerialists, we actually do all 5.
Yeah. So I'll segue back. So thanks for bringing me back to that, Carrie. So injury and impact, we went real deep into. Cumulative injury disorder or repetitive motion. Essentially, repetitive stress. Definitely as aerialists, even something as simple as if just doing a regular French climb, if you constantly are using your same side or you constantly climb with one arm grip above the other.
Your French climb is my regular climb, right?
Yeah, that's why I said regular French, because I was like, people's language is different.
My Russian is also your Russian. Is that right?
Yes, we're same on that.
Okay, cool.
Yes. That's an example of just a repetitive habitual stress of constantly exposing a limb movement pattern over and over and over. So we can get repetitive stress essentially via the tissues. Again, landing in chains constantly from doing a drop, that could be a repetitive stress. Biomechanics can be a repetitive stress. We talked a little bit about like if you have a holding pattern, right? And so now you're asking movement to happen on top of that holding pattern. That can be a cumulative injury setup. We could also just have unique anatomy. There are people that have a 13th rib, and that can change the mechanics of,
She looked at my face. I was like, what? Like, where is this 13th rib? Because then it's not symmetrical.
Often when people have it, it will be in the cervicals, and it can create thoracic outlet syndrome. So the mechanics of how they end up using their arm, especially in overhead positions, can start to get a little funky.
Man, I learn something new on this podcast every day.
This is why I've come to talk to you, Carrie.
I mean, the best part about getting older is knowing full well that I know so little.
Oh man.
And even the more I know, the more I find out how much I don't know. Life is amazing. So now have we talked about all the ways trauma can live in our tissues?
No, we got 3 others.
Okay. Oh my God. Keep on going.
Social conditioning. This is a really interesting one that a lot of us have probably at some point been impacted by. Let's just say that you grew up really fast around your peers, and maybe there's some teasing.
Like emotionally?
No. Like
like your bones, like your body grew really fast.
Your body grew really fast.
Faegann, I'm still waiting for that to happen.
I think for a lot of us aerialists, somehow it just got a little, I know I got stunted in the growth department. Yeah, if you grew up physically faster than your friends and you're really tall, if there was like comments that were made about it or attention was brought to it, sometimes people will literally shrink themselves. They'll start to hunch over to accommodate, to try to make themselves shorter around, their peers. And this can start to create trauma in the tissues. This can start to impact the holding patterns that we may exist in our body, right? If we do that for long periods of time, this can have a very vast long-term chain reaction. And this is where we start to go into chronic pain, right? Chronic trauma in the tissues. Or, another example too, social conditioning is here in the States, it's really common for mothers to carry their children like on their side or on their hip, right? But if we look at Africa, which we do a lot when we're looking at body movement and we're accessing biomechanics, is they'll carry their baby on their back or their front, right? So they're always having some type of a strap mechanism to go ahead and support their child while they have all their limbs available and free. Not to say that you don't see that in the States, but it's not nearly as commonplace. So that's one way that social conditioning, it's what we're exposed to, that all of a sudden influences the way that we're going to go ahead and move our body. But we have to look at what is the long-term exposure of doing that and how does that actually impact our body. We have choice. A perfect example of choice is our children learn how to walk by watching their parents, right? Our language when we're little is essentially it's feeling state, but it's also visual, right? So we will mimic the way our parents walk to go ahead and start to learn how to make those movement patterns. So if, dad, for example, has a small limp because he hurt his knee years ago and had some surgery, then the kid is actually going to go ahead and start to assume that they're going to go ahead and mimic this little movement pattern that's going to emulate their father because it's what they're exposed to. So that's actually a choice.
So you're saying my child's going to be really, really skilled at twerking because that's what I do at home?
You know it, Carrie. You know it. I know it. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Shake your moneymaker. I mean,
she is.
I was on a bar dancing in heels when I was pregnant, so I think it's going to happen no matter what I do.
She's got it in her, man. She's got the music, the vibes.
She's got the vibes.
She can move.
She's got the vibes. Mm-hmm. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's so cool to watch. My mind's blown slightly on this trauma in our tissues, and I sit here and wonder what I do to my body every day because I still have the problem of like, oh, I'm going to demonstrate this triple star, but I've not really warmed up that much. Mm-hmm. And I'm also not that young. So something to think about. I've gotten off pretty lucky though.
The last way we actually hold trauma in the tissues is psychological trauma. We can take that even from an airless scope of if we had a fall before. And we can hold that psychological trauma of the fall, not even the physical trauma of the fall, but the psychological trauma of that fall. We can hold that in our body. And we may move differently in the air because of that. Maybe we have a little bit of freeze still in our body. Birth trauma can be held in the body. And that could be from a psychological standpoint, just as much as physical, right? Injury trauma, let's just say that we have had an injury on our knee and we had surgery some time ago. And there's the psychological fear when we get back up into the air of like, is my knee going to do what I need it to do? Is it going to protect me? Is it going to, support me? And then we also have, when it comes to what I think we often think about as psychological trauma is like shock and developmental trauma. And so these are the events that can happen to us. And also the things that happen to us as we were growing up through our developmental ages. So yeah, it's pretty fascinating that we have these 5 different ways that can really impact our tissues and what's being held in our tissues.
And people always say we like to hold our emotions in our hips. And can you take that statement and make sense of it?
Our hips are, again, they're part of our center of gravity. And so there's a very grounding aspect to them. They keep us very earthed within gravity. And in this, there can be a lot of storing. This is an interesting visual. I don't necessarily just go around talking about this on podcasts, but there can be almost this like cesspooling that happens down within our pelvic bowl, right? If things aren't moving as ideal as we'd like. If there's stagnation in the tissues, if there's definitely if there's trauma in the tissues, then there can be a lot that gets pooled down at this lower center of gravity. And so a lot of us suppress emotion, right? Just in Western culture in general, but a lot of cultures across the board is we're not necessarily celebrated to speak to necessarily our emotional states or guided on how to emotionally regulate. And so what happens is we swallow this down. We bite our tongue, right? And so we keep pushing. And this is where all that energy just really gets contained in the pelvic bowl. And unless we really move and we give some permission for those tissues to start to free up and create some circulation, then these are emotions that can very easily be coincided to this location in our body, for sure.
Yeah, I always thought about that, like our bodies store our emotions. And I was like, well, that's kind of fruity. That's what I was always think. But we are only physical bodies. We don't live in half of a spiritual world where our emotions actually just get stored in some type of like ethereal bubble. We are physical bodies. And so if you think like your body is the only place it can be stored, these things can be stored unless they're let out. And the way they're let out, a lot of people don't do the things that you need to get it out. It doesn't just come out like poop and pee comes out.
Right.
I spent a lot of time talking about poop and pee in the last couple of weeks, and now it's like cesspool in the pelvic floor. Right. It's just like we are in the same, we're just going there.
Why not?
For
Why
weeks.
Not? Right.
For weeks. But it's true. It's like, if you really think about it, we only have physical bodies. It has to go into our body. And so how do we get it out? And for me, I talked a lot about in the past how body work, somebody performing body work on me has freed up my physical voice, has freed up my limbs because, oh my God, I was just like, I had so much like sadness and like, after the divorce that I have talked about all the time, it was just trapped in my body. And it took many months of body work of that energy release to get all this stuff out. And so then now I've become one of those fruity people because it's the only thing that makes sense to me. Because I'm also very spiritual, not from a religious standpoint. It makes sense to me.
You're essentially on to this bridge between the spirit and the soma, right? Of like you said, we have this physical body, we have a container, we have this place for these things to exist. Where else would it go? And what's beautiful is that pain science is actually caught up to be able to explain why our emotions can be in our tissues. Pain exists essentially as a protection mechanism, right? So whenever we're experiencing discomfort in an area of our body, it's essentially sending a signal of danger or damage, right? And the purpose of this is to motivate change. It's a survival mechanism. Pain exists for us to facilitate something new or different or shift, right? It wants us to bring attention to move through that, whether it's physical or emotional, psychosomatic, any of these things. And if you actually look at the definition from the International Association for the Study of Pain, their definition of pain is an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage. So what's fascinating, though, is for years, we were under the premise that there were pain receptors in the body. And there's actually no pain receptors in the body or the brain. What we have is this process called nociception, right? And nociception is what detects if there's what they call noxious stimuli. It's a mechanical, chemical, or thermal effect in the body. So this is the system that's communicating that there's something happening in the body that's calling for attention, right? So in this nociception, there's nociceptors. And these guys will pick up that something's happening in the body, in the tissues, whether it's somatic or visceral, cutaneous, skin, and it sends that to the central nervous system. And the central nervous system we can think of as just our spinal cord and our brain, right? So wherever this location of this discomfort is in our body, these nociceptors will pick up that signal. It'll take it to the spinal cord. It'll send that information to the brain. And then the brain, it governs that information of where to send it. And so it sends it to the thalamus, it sends the information to different cortexes, and it sends it to the limbic system, right? The cortexes, and there's a few of them that it'll get sent to, they're involved to make meaning out of this information, this stimulus that just came through, right? And the limbic system is what rules our emotions. It's what houses our emotional state. So what's happening is we're actually just getting a feedback system to interpret information. And so then once it's in the brain's trying to decipher what to make of this information, right? So again, we don't have pain receptors in the body. We don't even have pain receptors in the brain per se. What we have is a communication system, a messenger system that will take that information from the body, send it up to the brain. The brain then decides what to do with it. And how it filters this information is through a cognitive lens. It'll look at memories. It'll look at past experiences. It'll encompass your thoughts or your attitudes. So, if we have, I'm going to go back to this knee injury for whatever reason, we've had a previous knee injury, we had some surgery, and then we tweak our knee up in the air, right? Our brain immediately, as soon as it gets this information of this stimulus, is going to go into this process of thinking like, oh my gosh, I've been hurt here before. This was what happened. This is what that injury was. All these thoughts are going to come around it. Then this opens the gateway for our emotions, right? It's what feeling do I have placed upon that thought? And if the thought carries that idea of like, well, the last time I hurt my knee and I had surgery, I was out of aerial for X amount of months. And that makes somebody super sad or depressed, or maybe there's a lot of fear because that's, somewhere that's a part of their livelihood is, and they're working in that industry. So that's how the emotional context can get pulled into this picture of our perception of pain. Right. And the last and final lens that we look through as the brain's trying to decipher what to make of this pain is sensory, right? The actual like musculoskeletal, I mentioned visceral or cutaneous, which is our skin. It's taking all the, informational data of what occurred at this location to go ahead and determine like, what is my response to that? But there's no actual determination of that it is painful. It's what we make of all the information that we've just received from the incident or whatever trauma or injury we may have incurred that decides what to do with that.
And this is why, for example, if you go to the hospital with an injury, they'll ask you what your pain is from a level of 1 to 10, because it's our perception of the pain that they're asking for, right?
100%. 100%.
Okay.
Pain is relative. Pain is relative. There's such a huge spectrum from person to person about how that fits into whatever their previous experiences may be, and the different conditionings that we've been exposed to.
And so a lot of aerialists like to say, I have a high pain threshold because we've gone through that process of like, oh, this hurts. Oh, it doesn't hurt anymore. Now this hurts. That hurt is going away. So how does that fit in?
Yeah, fantastic question. So essentially, us aerialists, we're familiar with that process of like, this used to hurt and now it doesn't. And so, again, discomfort or pain exists initially to provide our body information about danger or tissue damage or damage in general. When we start to determine based on all these other factors, all this information we've accumulated, like, oh, there's no threat, or we don't need to be concerned, then we start to break through what is known as sensitization, right? It's sensitization is the amplification of a danger signaling, right? But if we've determined that the threat is not necessary to have this sensitization, we don't need to be sensitive to this experience, then we shift into the desensitization stage. And in that, we can start to build our pain tolerance. You can actually increase your pain tolerance intentionally. And you can do that through, this is actually done through scientific studies. They show that aerobic exercise will actually help increase your pain tolerance. Yoga, part of the mindfulness training of yoga, can help. Vocalization, actually, like if you're in the middle of, a skin the cat, and it's like, your muscles are just super, tight or sore or whatever, as you're going through this movement, if you actually vocalize like, ow, there's actually release in that. And so the body doesn't absorb this interpretation of pain as intensely. We can also use mental imagery and biofeedback to increase our pain tolerance.
I have a question. Okay, so we're both body workers. My practice is called Carrie's House of Pain. I like to lean into it, Lean in. So I've got a couple clients and they just curse the whole time. And I'm doing myofascia. I'm doing like corrective. So I'm not like trying to give them a good time. And I'm trying to get rid of a problem. Okay, so my clients cursing. Does that actually help? Does that actually, more than psychosomatic, help their pain tolerance during a session?
It's a form of release, for sure.
So the answer is yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Can be. I mean, there could be, kind of an opposite side of that spectrum as well, that maybe there's an attachment to pain. Sometimes that exists where maybe the need to be seen in our pain type of a thing. But for the most part, I'm going off on tangents here, but for the most part, somebody that, has, they're comfortable with expressing themselves, there's a release that's happening for them. And it's super welcomed. Yeah.
Okay, second question. Let's just say you're Faegann in 2013 and your body's really used to chains. But then somebody like, I don't know, you get your hand caught in a door or you get your toe stepped on. Something that is not what your body has been training. Mm-hmm. Is your pain tolerance for everything just heightened? Or is it something that you're not used to that will hurt just as much as if you didn't do all that pain training?
I love it. Pain training, number one.
That's my question. So if I were to like slap you across the face and you're not expecting it, is that going to hurt less because everything else is desensitized?
In theory, I can't say I've tested this out necessarily, but no, it really does apply across the board. And part of this is because she's note taken. Carrie's got somebody she wants to slap.
Let's test this next time I see you. No, I love you. I wouldn't be able to do it. I would try and then just wimp out.
Well, my pain tolerance is not 2013 chain days either, so I'd be feeling it.
Over our lifetime, if we're not doing that thing that's really beating us up and we kind of stop, we kind of have to retrain that in our bodies, right? Is it going to hurt again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that for whatever reason, maybe this last year or at times in their aerial exposure have been off their apparatus for more than a period of time that they would like, even if it's 2 weeks, 3 months, a year. And we notice that when we come back, there's certain things that you're just like, oh man, I have to go through this discomfort again. Just grip strength, my knuckles hurt again. Or, getting your fish totally wrapped in a knot and squished all over again. There's certain things that you're like, oh, okay, we have to go through the desensitization phase once again. And that's just, again, it's just reminding your body that there's no threat, there's no damage or danger that needs to be excited from the exposure that it's getting again.
I have another story about Faegann's pain tolerance from tour that I think I'm going to share right now.
Uh-oh.
So there is the culture of the roadies, like the roadies on the Motley Crue Kiss tour are just like the roadiest of roadie guys. Tatted, pierced, like if you do something embarrassing in front of them, you're never going to live it down, like ever. These guys, but they're also go to bat for you, and you know they're real amazing humans. But there's just culture around the roadies that every city you hit, you know, they're like trying to find the new tattoo parlor. Like they're trying to get a tat from every city in the world, and they want to add on, they want to color in, blah blah blah. So I don't know what city we were in, and you guys, I do not have a mark of ink on my body. I'm not into it. I don't like the pain. The idea of like putting ink and needles in my body as a choice is crazy. Like I don't even color my hair. You know what I'm saying? I don't do any of it. So
we love you for it, Carrie. We love you for it.
Yeah. I love that I can be myself too. You know, I don't need to do any of those things to fit in. Be myself. So I don't know what city it is, but Faegann's like, I'm going with, you know, roadie X, Y, and Z to go to the tattoo parlor. I'm like, cool, what are you getting worked on? She's like, my hands. I'm like, you know, the top of your hands? Like that, like what part of your hands? And she is gonna get a tattoo on her index finger to her thumb, like in that ridge, like on the palm side. She's gonna tattoo like a sentence or something, like on that L. She's got like a chains performance that night. Or was it the day before, Faegann?
It may have been on her day off performance, but it wasn't the first time it's happened. So.
I mean, it was definitely like, if it wasn't the day of, it was the day before. And I'm sitting there, I don't know, I'm at breakfast or something, we're at catering, and I'm like, doesn't that need like a couple days to settle? How's it gonna feel? She's like, it's fine. And it was. You didn't have any discomfort from like using your hands, and she's got fingerless gloves. So even though some of that joint is covered in her leather glove, there are definitely some skin that is not covered in those gloves. And she did her whole 7.5 minute chain act. She did the Silks duo that she does with me, and whatever else we did in that show. And she got those fresh tattoos. And the only thing she was bummed about is over time, the ink like went away. Right? Like, did you lose it? Like, did you lose that tattoo because of callousing and
you're totally right. Like, that's the only thing I was bummed about is like the tattoo really did start to come out. And you know, it was, I kind of knew I was playing with fire in that regard, just because your hands, you know, the skin cells on your hands and your feet just slough off so fast. So it was kind of not the most brilliant move in terms of, you know, being an aerialist and a body worker.
But literally she knew it wasn't going to bother her during the performance. And she was absolutely right. It didn't. So Carrie's fears were unfounded, but it's because I know that I couldn't do that. That's where that was coming from. Faegann knew exactly what she was capable of, and now I know what Faegann's capable of. So, you know, she did stuff like that, and I was just like, who is this alien? Gosh, I like this one. It's so good. Faegann, okay, two things. Do you have a good tour story to finish up with? And if you have any other really, really smart scientific points to close out with for this topic.
Yeah, you know, just because we're here, the thing that actually on that run that was the most painful or discomforting experience was, and it relates to this topic. It's the only time it's ever happened to me. Is Carrie and I, we did 5 shows a week when we were with Motley. And to me, that kind of falls like a little bit in the middle of the road, right? You might have kind of corporate where it's a bit of a one-off, or, you might be doing multiple shows in a week, but you might not be doing your same act every single night of the week. And then you might have the other end of that spectrum where maybe you're working at Cirque du Soleil and you're doing a couple of shows a night, or you're working at a theme park or destination park of some sort, and they might be doing 3 to 5 shows a day. So I kind of feel like we were landing right there in the middle, right? Just for a concept for exposure and frequency to our apparatuses. And it was the very last drop I had on chains. And to be honest, I don't remember the name of it or what it was called, but I remember at the very end, I was coming into an extra layer of a hip key, and I had to bring my top foot through so I could, access this next layer. And there was such little slack at the top of the chain. And, chains aren't very malleable once again, so there's not a lot of movement. And I had to brush my foot through this very small little corner to get up and around. And night after night after night, I was doing this. And what happened, this is a perfect example of kind of like more of a little bit of a long-term exposure to some of the soft tissue damage, is what would normally be like a superficial kind of bruise or contusion of some sort, is it became a hematoma. And this was probably about half the size of a softball, if not, tennis.
Can you
softball.
Explain for the listeners what a hematoma is?
Yeah, a hematoma is just really a different type of contusion, a different type of bruising. It essentially means that in that 4 healing stages that we went through, is that the inflammation was not getting pulled out, that the blood was actually now outside the damaged blood vessels where we want it to actually stay. It was definitely a very large, again, like half the size of a tennis ball, or like 3/4 the size of a tennis ball at the front of like the top of my foot, which made getting through the chains even harder because now I have like more surface areas how I felt. But that was painful. That was enough that I was just like, how to navigate this while we're on the road. So just simple kind of RICE measures that we're aware of: rest, ice, compression, elevation. And thankfully that was a short enough run that I was able to kind of get through that cycle without it being anything more than a severe contusion or hematoma. But that was, of all the things, that was the one where I was just like, yep, now I'm uncomfortable.
You're basically doing like a thread the needle, right? The pole is there and you have to get the knee through, following with the foot.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for the words.
I miss our nerdy aerial conversations. They just filled my soul with so much happiness.
We had fun, Carrie. We have so much
fun. And Faegann is the type of person that we could talk for hours. I don't even know what we talked about. We probably talked about this stuff, you guys. We're so nerdy with it. Do you have any on the road stories besides your huge hematoma? I mean, I would like when Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee would sit down at catering with us at breakfast. That was always an experience.
That's a really good reminder, for sure.
For me, it was always really interesting sharing the stage with, these iconic people that are almost caricatures in life because, they've been famous for so long. And you have like random conversations over the, about the catering. And then you're on stage with them and they're like, you almost died, but it was cool being with you, And I remember in dressing room time, like it would be like, all the doors are open and we're kind of all hanging out in our own dressing rooms. And Gene Simmons would just walk by and like give us this really weird, crazy look because he's a weird dude and he's funny. He just wanted to get a laugh, and he would just walk by.
He's such the ham. He totally was. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was fun. And, you'd be in the Oh, you know what I recently found out? So Austin, one of our sound guys, like, you know, we're still friends. We're friends on Facebook, and I just he just told a tour story, but from his perspective. It was the night we were in the tiniest town. It wasn't Reno. It was another town, and we were staying in a casino. And like the backstory to like what everybody did that night could have been a book. Because like him and 5 other people like went on this like type of night where like somebody got a face tattoo and there's a tiger, you know? It was like The Hangover 3. And I remember that night I got takeout from the downstairs like restaurant and sat and watched, I think Nikki played poker.
Oh, wow.
Nikki Sixx played some poker. And then I went upstairs and I watched Say Yes to the Dress because I was planning for my wedding. That's what I did. But then other groups of people, you know, like were in the Hangover 3, you know, Motley Crue edition. You know, like, yeah, it's funny, isn't it?
Yeah, so, I laugh because I'm so not surprised. That was definitely Crue times.
No. Yeah, and I spent a lot of time reading books like a big nerd and going to sleep early.
One memory that stands out, it's not exciting as a night after the show kind of memory, but like Carrie said, it was just always so epic to have these moments in passing with Tommy Lee or Nikki Sixx, but Mick was one of the ones that was often pretty quiet and often his own tour bus much of the time. But
Mick Mars of the Crew, yes,
yeah, good old Mick Mars, man. And I came out on Mick Mars's side at the close of the show for bows. And I just remember one night he just looks right at me and he just goes, "You guys are the stars of the show." He's like, "They're standing for you ladies." And I was like, Mick, like, you're amazing. Here's this like iconic Rock Hall of Fame guitarist, like absolutely an incredible musician, you know, has lived such a full life of just producing amazing material. And it was a sincere moment. Like, he genuinely meant it, you know, and Mick Mars was just always one of those people where I'm just like, you have such a heart of gold. And he was just like one of those one-liners kind of people. And it just kind of marks that tour in such a beautiful way of just really feeling included. You know, Motley Crue was definitely a family experience. It was a great time of our lives for sure.
Oh yeah. One of my best memories in my life, just not even being on the stage, but speaking of Mick, the number we would do after his guitar solo was Kickstart My Heart. And so I'd be backstage, you were on the other side, so I never talked to you. I had the stage manager and then the rigger on my side, and we were at the right angle just to see him lit up with that one spotlight on him.
Oh, wow.
And we would just watch him play this guitar solo every single night. And I just remember sitting there one time, like, just never forget this moment. Just let it live in your mind of how perfect it feels. Like, just listening to him play and watching it and hearing the audience. And then I get to go out and close a show, you know, with you. And then we all take a huge bow and just a huge arena tour. Such a good memory.
A once in a lifetime kind of experience we'll always remember for sure.
Thanks, Faegann, for being so generous with your knowledge on this. A lot of times with stuff like this, if you try to find this information online, you might not find it because it's about marrying the concepts to our applications, which is not regularly studied. I love that we can put these things to, these ideas to real things in our lives, you know, these apparatuses, because we are experiencing a lot of exposure and we don't really know very much about it. So this will add, hopefully, to the community's knowledge, which is great. Faegann, where can people find you? Or do you want to have anonymity?
I'm slowly entering out of my shell. I took a really lovely, I think 3-year hiatus from Instagram. and just really dove deep into the books. As you guys can tell, me and Carrie love to geek out on this stuff. And so, but I'm pulling all this material together for some new stuff in the works. Hopefully will kind of come out here either at the end of the year, beginning of next. So yeah, you can find me on my website at soulflylife.com, and check me out on Instagram. Might be a little pause button there for a little while, but stuff will be coming out here shortly.
Cool. I'll put that in the show notes. Yeah, this is amazing. Thank you so much for being generous, and I just miss you.
Yes, I know.
And look, I have a human.
No, you made a human.
I made a human. Isn't she just the best?
She's adorable.
Thank you so much to Faegann Harlow for being here. Yeah. And if you go to the show notes, you can grab my ebook for free. It comes out on July 1st. You'll get that as a free gift for being a podcast listener. Thanks so much to Asa Watkins for our music and post-production. And if you'll give me a 5-star rating and review anywhere you get your podcasts, it really helps other people find me more easily. Thanks so much for listening. You've been listening to the Expecting Aerialist podcast.